Good. Thank you so much. Good morning to everyone, and thank you for joining us. Senator McKinney and I are here on behalf of our respective caucuses to share some grave concerns that we have about a recent discovery we have of a system, if you will, that's going on in state government. Before we begin, I want to make it very clear that what we are about to say and to share with you is in no way, shape, or form an attack on any state employee or, frankly, any collective bargaining unit or unions in general. This is a concern with regard to a system. The system I'm referring to is known as union stewardship. Let me explain, if I may. For many, many years, in fact, from time immemorial, it has been the custom that collective bargaining units will assign or appoint or elect union representatives throughout the system they work in. These men or women are usually the highest paid within their class or their department, and their job is to be the go-to person, if you will, for other union members to speak to or take complaints or grievances, investigate various things. Again, a system that has been around for quite some time. Our concern is not so much with the system, or that particular aspect of it, but our concern is basically the way we do it here in the state of Connecticut. It's been my experience that any employer, be it a state or a municipality, who recognizes the rights of union stewards does so by paying that individual who's a state employee for obviously the state job that they're performing. In addition, the employer would give that person release time by which they could conduct their various union activities and union representation. Typically, however, this release time is paid for by the unions themselves, not in the case of the state of Connecticut. In the state of Connecticut, we pay the entire salary and fringe benefits for all union stewards. The other concern we have is that there is very little, if any, restrictions or policies with regard to how much time these individuals can spend in conducting union business. As an example, we took a phrase out of one of the contracts, the Maintenance and Service Unit contract, which says as follows: union stewards exercising their responsibility under this contract under state labor law shall not be limited to a prescribed number of hours for release time during any day, week, or other period of time during this contract. Excuse me. If, in the employer's opinion, any steward is devoting an excessive amount of time to steward activities, representatives of the union and the Office of Labor Relations will meet to reach a mutually acceptable solution of the matter, e.g., reallocation of steward assignments, full or partial leaves of absences as provided in Article 7, Section 8. The other concern we have is while these individuals are performing their union duties, their state duties are either not being done or there's a necessity that we, as a state employer, have other people doing that job, either by way of a substitute or by way of paying someone overtime. When this came to our attention, we asked the Office of Fiscal Analysis, the nonpartisan Office of Fiscal Analysis, to tell us exactly how many of these union stewards that we have. To our surprise, we found that here in the state of Connecticut, we have 911 such union stewards, 911 state employees whose benefits and salaries are fully paid by the state of Connecticut, who are given unlimited release time to conduct union activities. The collective salaries of these individuals salaries and benefits approximates $93 million. Again, this is not a fault of the individuals who hold that job. It is not a fault of state employees. It is not a fault of the union. It's a system that has been in existence for quite some time, a system that has gotten out of control, a system that is susceptible to all kinds of abuse, and frankly, a system that we as a state can no longer afford to maintain. We are, each one of us, are scraping every nickel we can to try to balance this budget, to provide services to the needy, to maintain a safety net, to provide services to our citizens. When we discover things such as this, especially in this time, it is clear to us that this can no longer go on. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Senator McKinney.
Thank you, Larry. Larry ended with what is the obvious big picture here. The state of Connecticut and our citizens are facing a budget deficit of over $3 billion at a time when Governor Malloy has offered a solution to that deficit, which proposes the largest tax increase in our state's history. A tax increase which is aimed mostly at the middle class of the state of Connecticut. We as Republicans believe that before you should raise $1 in new taxes, you need to look at the spending problem we have, make spending cuts, and look at any areas where there are wasted tax dollars, just as we did last week in calling for an end in longevity payments. Again today, we are exposing another area where we are spending taxpayer dollars where we should not. Union activity should be paid for with union dues. State activity should be paid for by state taxpayers. It's that simple. The reason why we are here today, though, as Larry said, is this is not to blame anyone other than the legislature for the system we have. It is the legislature who has continued to promise and offer things that the people of the state of Connecticut can no longer afford. So it's time for us to step up to the plate. It's time for us to work with Governor Malloy on changing some of these systems that waste taxpayer dollars and, quite frankly, we can no longer afford.
At this time, I'd like to call up Craig Miner, a House ranking member in the Appropriations Committee, to share a few thoughts and observations. Craig?
Thank you, Larry. During the process of looking at the governor's budget, many of us have been involved in looking at each of his recommendations for consolidations. And what was disclosed during one of those conversations was that within one of the small agencies he proposed to consolidate, there were 2 employees that worked in the IT department. The employee that had been at work every day faithfully would lose his or her job. The position that was retained was that of a union steward. And so I asked how that works and was told that in this case, they had no ability to change what was bound by contract, and that was how this whole consolidation would shake out. There was another circumstance, again a conversation with a state employee about how many hours, how many days that individual worked doing his or her job for the agency in which they worked. And I was told 3 days. My next question was, what do you do on those other 2 days a week? And I was told, no, that's 3 days a month. What I'm concerned about, and I think what we're concerned about, is that as we struggle to bridge this gap, there are these relationships, these underpinnings in contract that are going to make it very difficult for the state of Connecticut to unwind in some of these agencies, in some of these cases, that relationship so that you can actually make consolidations. By virtue of their contract, they have rights that no one else has. And so that's when we started asking questions of OFA, how many, within which agencies, and so on, so we could try and get a handle on this. And I think most people would realize the information's quite compelling. But that's just 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to echo or highlight something that was said by Craig Miner, the individuals who are designated as union stewards, within their union contracts, most of them provide that past and present union stewards have the highest level of seniority with regard to layoffs. So that's the example that Craig Miner just gave, where in an agency that's being consolidated, where you have 2, one of which is a union steward, the union steward gets priority with regard to layoffs. However, the union steward does not necessarily, in fact, does not give up their job as union steward. So here we have a situation where you have one person who is performing the duties that two people did, and that person is free to be released at any time during day, week, month, etc., and again at the taxpayer's expense. So basically, with regard to salaries and fringe benefits, we're talking about 911 people who are being paid with taxpayer dollars $93 million, and that does not include the cost of what it would take to have people cover for them when they are performing their union duties, either by way of hiring a substitute or by way of paying overtime. And we're calling upon our governor, and certainly I'm sure this might be news to him as well, because this is administered through the Office of Policy and Management and the Office of Labor Relations, to take a good hard look at this system as he continues with conversations with union representatives with regard to concessions and otherwise, because once again, this is a system that cannot be sustained. We cannot afford it at this time. And that concludes our formal remarks. We'll be glad to take any questions.